From the Chesapeake Bay Journal, your source for independent environmental reporting, this is Chesapeake Uncharted, the podcast that uncovers stories about the Bay, its interconnected ecosystem, and the people who rely on them. I'm Jeremy Cox. On today's episode,
I want to make sure that I do my part as a Black woman, and especially one in this environmental field, to make sure that it is welcoming. Like, I see myself trailblazing, so that folks who come after me feel comfortable in these traditionally white spaces.
before we launch into this week's story, let's spend some time with that word we just heard. Trailblazing. It's one of those words that creates a picture in your mind. My image is of someone trekking through a jungle, slashing away at the dense growth with a machete, inching forward, one slash at a time, literally stepping where few people have ever stepped before. Now, when you talk about trailblazing in 2024, it feels a bit anachronistic. At least it does to me. We humans have pushed onto every corner of the Earth and the bottom of the ocean. We've even traveled to the moon. It's all been done, or so it would seem. There are still trailblazers among us, people who venture into the unknown, people who set a standard in their field, leaving a path for others to follow. I'm talking about people like our guest today, a woman who has cleared away the obstacles before her with a figurative machete. And wouldn't you know it, now there's a path, just waiting to lead others forward. Welcome to Season 3 of Chesapeake Uncharted. This time, our team here at the Bay Journal is interested in hearing from a younger generation of Bay leaders, the people who weren't born when the Chesapeake Bay cleanup formally began 40 years ago. With the Bay restoration effort facing its current set of cleanup goals in 2025, this felt like a good time to go searching for some inspiration. Each episode spotlights one of these wave makers. Today, our guest is Maya Alexander. She has worked professionally in environmental advocacy for a few short years, yet she has already left a big mark. She serves as the Community Engagement Manager for the Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley, a nonprofit based in Newmarket, Virginia. Last September, the Virginia Conservation Network presented Alexander with the Rising Star Award at its first ever Conservation Awards ceremony. So we have a lot to talk about, right after this quick break.
Hi, this is Laura Lutz, editor at the Chesapeake Bay Journal. I hope you're enjoying our podcast, and I'd like to invite you to join the community of Bay Journal readers. If you care about climate change, wildlife, clean air, healthy communities, and of course the Bay and its rivers, you'll find news you can use at the Bay Journal, along with some great ideas for outdoor travel. Our subscriptions are free. Check us out at bayjournal.com and click on subscribe to start receiving the best independent environmental news in the Bay region.
Hello again. On today's episode of Chesapeake Uncharted, we're listening to my interview with Maya Alexander. Alexander was raised in Columbia, Maryland, went to college on the Eastern Shore, and now works in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. I don't think we've talked to a wave maker yet with such broad geographic knowledge of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Helping others fall in love with this landscape is one of her passions. Alexander is Black and has experienced firsthand the challenges of engaging with nature, a pastime that has traditionally been associated with the white middle class. Like I said at the top, Alexander finds a way to keep moving forward in the face of adversity. We talked about her strategies for encouraging more diversity in outdoor pursuits, and she offered glimpses into how environmental organizations can take up causes for marginalized communities without alienating them. Off we go. Well, Maya Alexander, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I first got to say, Maya is a fantastic name for someone who works in the environmental field. Was that your parents' idea?
There was a meaning behind it. I forget. I know it's like something about leader of the people. Some of like the combination between my middle name Nicole and I'm like that's a lot of pressure. But I love my name.
I wanted to start off. You've had quite a bit of success lately. You're racking up the accolades. Let's see here. To embarrass you, you were named a rising star by the Virginia Conservation Network in their inaugural Conservation Awards. And you were recently accepted into the Leaders of Color Circle at the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. All right, so what's the secret sauce?
I don't have it. I'm just me. I am just Maya, and I love what I do, and I'm very grateful that I work in a field that I can translate my passion into purpose, and I feel like anyone that can do that, like that's kind of the secret sauce. Like, do what you love.
Well, the idea of this season is we're talking to people who are 40 or failing in that, at least younger than me, 44. How old are you?
I'll be 30 next year.
Keep that in mind, folks, as we talk about this and you question what you've done with your life. You are a native of the watershed, correct, in Maryland?
That's right, yep. I was born in D.C., raised in Maryland, Howard County area.
Did you have nature in your childhood?
As far back as I can remember, I was always outside. Like, I used to want to be an entomologist. Like, I loved the bugs and, neighborhood friends. And we were out all the time riding bikes, trying to go down to the creek, the Little Patuxent River. Like, I have lots of childhood memories there. So, yeah, I like to say, if I could, any chance I got, I was outside.
So, you are a community engagement manager for the Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley. First, help us, if folks are unfamiliar, what is the Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley?
Yeah, the Alliance is a nonprofit organization based here in the Shenandoah Valley. It specializes in a lot of land use and transportation planning, and we work in 6 counties in the Shenandoah Valley. And I like to connect the communities with the work that we're doing. So, like, for example, solar projects, things like that. We like to make sure that the community is informed on things like that, but of course not limited to that. There's other things like exciting projects, the Shenandoah Rail Trail, doing some work on that. But that is kind of the Shenandoah Valley, or Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley in a nutshell.
And a community engagement manager. So what does that mean that you do?
Yeah, so like I kind of briefly mentioned, we do a lot of work in the community. Some may call it grassroots, but like that's what we do, making sure that folks know what are projects coming in the area, and how, to make sure that they have the information to help make informed decisions if it's helpful. And so I connect to the communities with whatever we've got going on, helping to put on events that are, related to the work that we do, that align with our mission and vision. And and I love it. I've, traditionally worked as an environmental educator, and I think that engagement, community engagement, and education, it's similar in ways.
How so?
I think that like my heart really is in environmental education, and I took this job. I was like, well, it's a little bit different, but I find community engagement and environmental education as like the foundation of stewardship. Really, like that's where you're helping folks connect, like find ways to access, ways to the environment, nature, the outdoors through activities, webinars, information sessions, whatever it is. Like you're kind of helping to foster whatever the start or the continuation of folks' relationship with the outdoors is, whether it be through land use transportation or like I said, or like webinars, things like that.
Well, that sounds like a good time to bring up this program that you helped coordinate called The Outdoors is Yours. Can you talk about what that was about?
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the ones like I'm very proud to have worked on with so many other partners in the region. And basically it was an idea to, make sure that we were providing ways for the community to know of ways that they could access the outdoors, also learn of ways people are already like using or like spending time outdoors. And it was an evening event where we gathered the community to come. We provided childcare and dinner, but we had speakers lined up: Nathan Burrell from the Virginia Outdoors Foundation and Esther Nizer, who was a Shenandoah Valley native, who was on the board of the Virginia's DCR, Department for Conservation and Recreation. And she loves to like solo hike. And these were both Black folks that, have connections to nature, the outdoors, whether it be through their work, like Nathan, or Esther, who has a passion for the environment. And just like having folks, the community, hear the stories of the different ways in which we've all had, introductions to the outdoors. Maybe for BIPOC communities a little bit different, where traditionally we've been excluded or left out of outdoor spaces in the past, or even now, so maybe limit some access to outdoor spaces. And just hearing that, like having the community hear and share ways in which they're connected, to learn of ways in which people want to connect more with the outdoors. What are some barriers? Is it the price to get into the Shenandoah National Park? Or is it that, you don't have a car, or, there's no safe way to bike or walk in their neighborhood? Like, what are ways that people are missing to, to build that connection? So the Outdoors is Yours is very much like a gathering event, but it was very much like a listening and like learning session. It was great. Over 100 folks came from the community, and we had several partners from like the local parks and recs departments, and also some state parks. We had the 7 Bends, and yeah, it was great. It was a nice event.
You said you weren't just there to share information, but to listen as well. What was kind of your main takeaway from that experience?
Yeah, that there's an appetite for us to make sure that we are making spaces, outdoor spaces for everyone, like making sure they are inclusive, not just for like, of course, folks of different ethnicities and races, but also making sure like for physical disabilities as well. Like, what are we doing? Like, there's always more work that can be done. So it was great just to hear like from the community, what are some things they want to see? And then from there, how can we implement it? I think that's the key thing. Like, we can talk all we want about these things, right? But like, what are we doing? Who are the folks already doing this work? And like, how can we continue to collaborate to bring these things into fruition?
Hi, listeners. I just wanted to pop into the conversation here and briefly explain this next part. Maya and I spoke over Zoom last December. Right at this point in our discussion, I posed a question or two about her own experiences as a Black woman in the outdoors. She answered, and we moved on. But a few days later, I got an email from Maya saying she wanted a redo. She understandably wanted her responses to be as precise as possible. Given the weight of the issues at hand, I granted her request, and she emailed me a recording with a new response. So I'll play that for you now.
For what it's worth, here are some like additional, maybe clarifying points that, yes, I was thinking about over the weekend after our podcast interview. And just 2 points I wanted to clarify. One being about like the safety aspect. I feel like I didn't have my thoughts maybe clearly in my mind, but just to address like the safety aspect of, yes, adventuring out here in the Shenandoah Valley. I have many favorite spots, and I love that we have a national park and a national forest. The public lands, I mean, it's great and accessible, but also acknowledging, the safety. And when you do go into the wilderness, into the wild, that you are more vulnerable, and just noting that. And the general safety aspects, like if I'm going somewhere, need to make sure that people know where I'm going. Just you're more vulnerable as opposed to maybe going to an urban park or wherever. And then also being a Black woman, like noting like where I am in the region in the Shenandoah Valley, like there are a lot of, battlefields, historical things out here, sites. And with that comes some symbols that can be triggering for me. And when I do go out to these more remote places, there are often some, symbols, flags, if you will, that I just make sure I'm mindful of, and my feelings and how I can feel discomfort in the moment. Don't let it stop me. But again, just acknowledging that those are there, and also acknowledging like the discomfort that may have for other folks of color as they're trying to build a relationship in outdoor spaces. And that's what I've got.
And now, back to your regularly scheduled conversation. What's your favorite place to visit there?
Like I said, I am 15 minutes from the southern terminus of the Shenandoah National Park, and like jointly the northern end of the Blue Ridge Parkway. So I'm constantly like just going, I mean, that's so easy. I go there, I'm like friends with the ranger there. He's like, I think you're up here more than me. I'm like, well, I'll take that as a compliment. So like, honestly, Shenandoah National Park, I kind of hang in like the southern terminus area. There's Beagle Gap, which is pretty cool. It's like where the AT kind of like crosses these balds of a mountain, and that's a cool spot to kind of be situated there at the park along the Appalachian Trail, and yeah, it's a nice view.
Is hiking kind of the main thing you like to do, or?
I love hiking. I do miss the water a lot too. I mean, we do have the rivers here. This was a dry season, so I didn't get out on the water like any kayaks or canoes. I recently taken up caving, and not just like walking in like the show caves, like actually going like wild caving. I've heard some folks refer to it. But that has been like very cool, growing in a new way, like challenging like some fears there. But that has been something. The karst topography that we have out here in the valley makes it for a great spot to kind of take up caving.
Your organization has been, it sounds like, a big proponent of the Shenandoah Rail Trail. What is that?
For those who haven't heard of it, it's a proposed 49 and a half at least mile long stretch of what is currently railroad tracks to turn it into a rail trail that will be multi-use, multi-purpose, a shared use path for everyone. And it'll run between, if you know Broadway and Front Royal, Virginia, that's where it'll run. And yeah, we're the Alliance is happy to be proud partners in the partnership that exists, so the Shenandoah Rail Trail Partnership, and kind of helping to keep the efforts going, so making sure that we're continuing to raise advocacy for this project so that we can get it going. We definitely want to see it in our lifetimes, and the community work as well. So a lot of the communications, we delivered, 10 meetings, I think, early this year, so that folks in all the towns along this corridor could learn about what the project is, the proposed project, and share, also like a listening session for the community, share what they want, like how can this trail best serve them. So it's not like this is coming, you've got to abide by this. The trail's in here yet. When it comes time to design, what are some things that can be incorporated so it best serves this town? And it was different across the different towns, but it was great to kind of create that space so that folks can have autonomy in this project.
Of course, when you give folks a say, you might hear some criticism, and I guess that was the case here. What were some of the main criticisms that you heard?
For sure, yeah. People want to, there are some folks that want to bring the trains back on to the corridor. Also, folks that don't want to lose the history. So kind of to the point earlier about, when you remove something physically, does that take away the historical impact of this infrastructure? So, folks that don't want to see the railroad tracks go or want to bring the trains and have a trail. And I totally acknowledge, trains are cool, but especially where they make sense. So this corridor here is only a single track corridor, so only one train at a time can go back and forth along this corridor. And the current width of the right-of-way, it is not wide enough for a trail and the train. So there's that. But yeah, to the folks who want to that don't want to lose the history, the way we've been framing it is we're very much restoring this community asset. Yes, we acknowledge that it was a train that folks used to travel in between the towns, which is so cool. And of course, deliver goods throughout the towns as well. Yeah, that was in the past. Now it's just sitting, right? It's not being used at all. How can we restore it, turn it into something that it can be used and for the communities once again, just in a different way? And I totally understand change is hard, right? But just trying to reframe it that maybe you're not so much losing something, but gaining something in return.
So I was wondering if you could bring me up to speed on another initiative that you've been behind, producing a webinar to honor one of the last Black families that are on their family land in Augusta County there. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that was the Browns, Mr. Walter and Miss Joan Brown. And yeah, they're on one of the last remaining Black-owned farms in Augusta County. So that says something there, right? There used to be thousands of acres of Black-owned land in Augusta County, and now it is not nearly as much. So we wanted to honor them. They've, implemented some easements so that their land is protected in perpetuity, I think under a USDA easement. Also working with the Black Family Land Trust, who's a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing resources like this to Black landowners. And it was just great meeting with Mr. Brown and talking about his legacy. This land has been in his family for generations, 3 generations. And his grandfather was the one who acquired the land so that he could vote. He acquired it, it counted you as a person. What was it? Black folks were not counted as whole, like, right? And like being able to vote, like certain things, right? Rights that you could then access. So he had bought the land and kept it in the family. They had farmed it. And the fact that Mr. Walter Brown is wanting to keep it in the family for future generations to come, I think is valuable. And especially as we're losing Black land across the country, it's really important to make sure that we do keep what is left and do preserve and honor it. And I do think that they were appreciative of the honor, and it was great to just honor them with the Valley Treasure Award, we call it. So folks that are doing their part in the community, because the Alliance can't do it all, but celebrating the folks that are doing these things, these practices on the ground, implementing easements, conservation practices. And yeah, it was cool. It was a great program we had.
What is the driver of that loss of land in the hands of Black families?
There's several things. I can't speak to like the exact facts of it all, but I'm sure there are factors from folks moving away from the family land, selling it because the monetary value as well. There's a saying like, you better keep your grandmama's land, like, because your ancestors work hard for it, but not everyone can keep up with the financial maintenance, like, the taxes on the property, all of that. And so sometimes it's just easier to sell it, right? And I do think that is probably one of the biggest drivers. And so, like, what can we do to make sure that those barriers, right, the financial barriers are not stopping, like, are not a reason for folks to not keep their land?
So what do you hope people get out of the experience of learning about the story of the Brown family?
Black land, it exists, right? Like, I feel like that's not something maybe people think about often, but, like, there are Black farmers and there are Black, conservationists or what, like folks that have had land in their family for generations. I think that's his story. The legacy is amazing in itself. So I think that's important, right? But then also like knowing that this land is disappearing, what can we do to protect it, to preserve it so that we don't keep losing it? What are the resources that we need to implement?
So turning to your personal story, how did you wind up in this field, the environment?
I guess going back to my roots, right, that I always was outside and it was just natural to me. I studied psychology in college, and it was a course, I always say it was like an interdisciplinary course. It was the psychology of global climate change. And I was like, oh my God, that changed my whole life because I could put psychology and the environment together, because it's really like us, the people, right, that have to implement, we have to steward the environment so that we can be more resilient for whatever's to come for climate change or whatever. And that led me on the trajectory of like, okay, well, I think the environmental field is like my space. I'm very interested in behavior change. But I did the Chesapeake Conservation Corps in 2016 to 2017. And that's where I first got my dose of environmental education. I was like, this is great. And I loved, again, teaching kids and adults alike of, again, the things of nature, what we need to do our part to steward it. And so since then, for like 6 years, I was the environmental educator or an environmental educator at Arlington Echo Outdoor Education Center, National Aquarium, and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and loved it. And then kind of translated my love for environmental education into community engagement with my current role at the Alliance.
So we've met before. It was my first year, I think, working for the Bay Journal 2019 and the before times. And I was doing an article spotlighting the program Anne Arundel Watershed Stewards Academy, where future leaders kind of learn the ropes through dedicated classes. And remind me and remind folks here, why did you? It sounds like you already had quite a bit of experience. Why did you want to go through that program?
And I was thinking, like, what year was that? Yeah, because I was still kind of early on in my career then. But, like, as an environmental educator, I think what I had joined WSA for that cohort, they had just added the environmental literacy track, or had just recently added it. I may have been the second class to have done that. And I was like, well, this is great. Like, what are ways in which I can incorporate what I'm already learning as an environmental educator through, like, this stewardship program, like, to share it within the neighborhoods? And I don't know, it kind of did come, second nature to me. I was like, this is great. But I love the WSA program, and I think it's a great way, again, like the community engagement there. What are ways that you can get neighbors involved in behavior change. Like, what are things that we can do, implement at the home level, at the neighborhood level, and it like spreads, right? Like, again, kind of like planting those seeds and the roots get stronger.
One of the major goals of the Chesapeake Bay cleanup is to increase recreational opportunities for folks. With the experiences that you've had, what would you tell powers that be? What needs to be done to get people better connected with those resources?
I know, how much time do you have? I really think, like, I'm biased maybe with like the people aspect, but from my background in psychology and like working in education and community engagement, but like really like supporting the people, the communities. And, I know we fund a lot of work in, clean water, like, yes, making sure, putting in BMPs and all that. And I'm not saying that that's not important work, but just as important as that work is also making sure that the community that lives like right along the river and maybe next to a factory, like also they have the resources so that they're, whatever environmental harm that is being done to maybe their health or things like that they have access, right? So they have the right to clean water, the clean air, and then whatever it is that they need to thrive, that also relates to like maybe some clean water goals. Maybe it's increasing shade in a neighborhood, like making sure that the neighborhood has access to funding or planting trees maybe in that neighborhood so that they have shade and so that they are not more susceptible to the heat island effect, right? But then in turn, you have more trees in an area that also does help the quality of our waterways. So I don't know, maybe just like honing in more on the connections between the people and the environment.
Chesapeake Uncharted is brought to you by the Bay Journal, your source for independent environmental news in the Chesapeake region. Production for this episode was by me, Jeremy Cox. The story was edited by Laura Lutz. Our marketing and advertising director is Jackie Kane. You can find more episodes of Chesapeake Uncharted on your favorite streaming service or at ChesapeakeUncharted.com. If you like what you're hearing, sign up for a free Bay Journal news subscription at BayJournal.com. Until next time, this has been Jeremy Cox. Take care.